Hey there, folks. My name's Dan Barrett. I'll be joined in just a moment by Simon Foster. This is a movie that it didn't just steal my heart. It didn't just steal Simon's heart. It stole all of screen viewers' hearts everywhere. It's the 1987 movie Burglar, starring one Whoopi Goldberg. You may have heard of her. Folks, we'll be talking about this on the Best Movie Year podcast. Wait, what is this podcast? What is it about? Well, it's right there on the title. Best Movie Year. Was it? Question mark. And now you need a little bit more detail. 1987. Was that the best movie year? There's only one way to find out, and that is to have myself and Simon sit down with our qualified opinions and watch 100 movies from 1987 with the determination at the end, was it the best movie year? Spoiler alert, we're probably going to have an episode afterwards looking at a different year, so it will be a question which will remain unanswered, but we will try to answer it one day, and you can only do that by watching 1987's Burglar. Hey Simon, we both watched Burglar during the week. I've gotten on the internet, it comes on computers now. According to this internet I hear about, 27% on Rotten Tomatoes for the film Burglar. Is that too high?
Well, it does seem a bit excessive if it's the same movie that I watched. Yes, Burglar starring one Whoopi Goldberg was released...
Wait, sorry.
What?
I think 27% is probably spot on about right for this movie.
I guess that does translate to 2.7 out of 10. I gave it 2 on Letterboxd, on my Letterboxd, so that accounts to 4 out of 10, so maybe I was a little bit generous. But no, 27% seems about right.
I don't remember what I gave it, only because I thought we were recording this podcast about 7 days ago, and I watched it, I prepared for it. I fell asleep while I was watching it, and then the next day I watched it again, so I could talk about it with you, and then you're like, no, can I have a few days?
You. Yeah.
And then, so it's been forever, but apparently I gave it 2.5 stars.
Okay. Oh, boy, that's bold. It was first released into US cinemas March 20, 1987, which is good for us because that's what our podcast is all about.
Convenient.
Budget-wise, it cost $12.5 million to make. Let's go through some stats here. This is the sexy part of the podcast. In 2024 dollars, that's $34.5 million, which, it's not that expensive nowadays, but a lot of it's up there on the screen. Its box office takings was $16.3 million, or in 2025 dollars, that's US 45, just a tad over a 45 million. So it wasn't a major success, that's for sure. In fact, on the Box Office Mojo 1987 chart, it came in 69th on the movies for 1987. Now, generally, we have a bit of a history with the films in the Best Movie Year podcast. Dan Barrett, had you seen it? Had you heard of it? Did you know of it? How many times have you watched it?
So look, I mean, you were qualifying, was it a financial success based off the, box office? I can't help but feel that it probably did okay as a VHS rental.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I'm
everything
sure
did.
Yeah, I'm sure it well and truly made its money back. Just on that, do you want to know what the popular VHS rentals were of this week?
Oh, do I ever? Now, are these rentals or are these your sell-throughs? Oh, this is interesting. Where did you find this info?
Around the place.
Yeah, let's do this.
Back alleys.
This is my scene, baby. This was my industry. Let's go.
Okay, the top 5 things people were renting the week that this movie came out. There was Back to School, the Rodney Dangerfield classic. Yep.
Yep.
There's The Karate Kid Part 2.
Nice.
Yep. Running Scared.
With Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines. Great Peter Hyams film, yep.
Yep. The Farrah Fawcett classic, Extremities.
Wow, that was a tough watch. That was a departure for her. Yeah, good film.
And number 5 on the list was Labyrinth, starring one Bowie, David.
This is peak VHS rental. I can envision the great Video Easy, Blockbuster, mum and pup video stores of the day, and those movies just taking up thousands of cubic feet of shelf space. So that's a good top 5.
Yeah, to answer your question, how did I watch this? I'm almost certain that this was... I don't think it was a VHS staple in the household, but I can't help but feel that as a youngster when I was, maybe like 8, 9, 10, thereabouts, I think I quite liked Whoopi Goldberg, and I probably rented this out a couple of times and tried to watch it and didn't enjoy it much, because I know that I didn't watch it much as a kid, but I certainly wasn't unfamiliar with it.
Now, 35 years later, here we are doing it all again.
Living the dream.
Now, for those of you who have been listening to the first 15 episodes of this podcast, it's basically me saying, yes, I saw this 7 times, and Dan saying, no, I haven't seen it at all. But we have a reverse situation here where this is an absolute first watch for me.
Really?
I'd never seen this film.
You're welcome.
By the time it came to cinemas here in Australia, I definitely remember it having a cinema release, but it already had a bit of a stink about it and was sort of dumped into cinemas. And that stink continued over into its VHS release for me. And it's just one I just never bothered to go back to and ever watch. So watching the version that we watched, it is available for rental on Apple iTunes. It's not available to free stream here in Australia. Similarly, in the US, it's available as an iTunes rental or to subscribers for Amazon Prime, but not available to free stream everywhere.
Although quietly, if you jumped on youtube.com and you typed in Burglar, you'd probably find it quite easily.
Yeah, that's kind of what we did. So, as a first-time watch, for me, look, the words kind of messy, disappointed, terrible. In fact, in my note-taking, which I looked over just prior to recording this podcast, I used the word terrible 5 times and didn't even realise it. So that is kind of where we are. Let me run through the plot very quickly for you. By day, Bernie Rodenbauer, Whoopi Goldberg, runs a reputable bookstore in one of San Francisco's coolest neighborhoods, but by night, and sometimes by day, she's a career burglar. Now, despite the concerns of her poodle groomer friend Carl, played by Bobcat Goldthwait, she's forced into one more big heist to pay off a dirty cop Ray, played by G.W. Bailey. But her life is upended when the scene of her crime suddenly includes a dead body, and now Bernie has to use all her criminal guile to clear her name of the murder and, in capitals, avoid getting charged with the burglary. Compelling stuff, I've got to say. Dan Barrett, do you want to weigh in on just how compelled you were by this plot?
Look, I do want to talk about that, but first, can we play the trailer? And
let's do that.
We'll come back and we'll go in depth.
Whoopi Goldberg. She's just your average, hard-working burglar
Is anybody home?
trying to earn a living.
What's behind curtain number 1?
But this time,
Oh, this is very nice, very nice.
instead of making a killing, she's going to witness one. And for an independent woman, she's suddenly got quite a following.
Shoot her!
I'm not gonna shoot her!
They shoot her in L.A.
We're not in L.A.!
Oh, you see that guy up there? That's my partner.
Whoa! What's going on up there?
You're an artist, huh? This is really hip like the brothers do. Umbele, ado, bado.
Whoopi Goldberg,
Hey, what's happening, man?
Bob Goldthwait,
So what are you doing when you're not driving your guys wild?
Clear the sidewalk. The city of San Francisco thanks you.
And I thank you, too.
Burglar.
Come to mama.
A first-rate comedy about a second-story woman.
What did she say? Do the hand. She says do the hand.
Burglar. When you care enough to take the very best.
Gotta stop doing this stuff.
So look, Simon, this here, look, as we said at the top, it's a 27% Rotten Tomatoes film,
Let's
and I
go.
think that's about.
Let's unload. Come on.
When you're watching this, and let me tell you a little bit about the 1980s, Simon.
Oh,
Let me
okay.
tell you. Okay. So look, this came out in 87. When people are watching it and talking about the movie now, I think there's a very, and it's understandable, like I get why it happens. People make a reference saying, oh, well, it's kind of just like a retread, a bit of an effort to try to tap into Eddie Murphy doing Beverly Hills Cop.
Boom. My number one note says exactly that. There's a very obvious Beverly Hills Cop wannabe vibe.
Okay, and I'm really glad that you were so adamant about saying that, because my next note is, anyone who says that is probably just being a little bit racist, because while I certainly understand why you've been led to that, what I think the film's actually doing is Fletch. Okay,
Yes.
and when you're watching it, okay, it starts out at the beginning with Whoopi Goldberg dressed up as an older sort of cleaning lady. Okay, and to me, like, that was the most Fletchy moment of the film. But when you listen to the very 1985 musical score for this movie made in 1987, like, it sounds a lot like the Fletch score. And I really think they were looking at Fletch and trying to, harken back to that.
Well, I can...
Yeah,
so
sorry.
let me just comment on that. There is a very definite correlation between the character parts and the dress up that Chevy Chase did in his Fletch films and what Whoopi was trying to do, and this with Burglar, and that very much suited her Broadway show at the time. She was famous. The maid character was part of her Broadway show. A little bit later on, when she goes around to the bad guy's house and the Doberman dog is there, the junkie character that she plays in that was directly from her Broadway show. So you're absolutely right in that she is given the opportunity, but not really to go all in like they did with Fletch, to utilize her mimicry and her character parts. With this.
And there's a reason for that.
What is that reason?
Okay, so this movie, as originally conceived, was originally going to go out to Bruce Willis.
Right.
Okay, so bear in mind, this is 1987, so this film came out just before Blind Date did. Okay, so we're talking about that era of Bruce Willis, which is, post-Moonlighting's been around for a year or two, but he's not like the biggest sort of movie star on the planet. So this at this point would have been him trying to decide how he wanted to mount his Hollywood career and what he wanted to do going forward. Clearly, we know from history that he made the right choices along the way. I can't speak to the quality of Blind Date. We'll find that out later on in the season of movies. But certainly, this was one that was very much on the table for and was written largely with the idea that he'd do it. So when you say that this wasn't necessarily sort of tapping into the strength of Whoopi Goldberg's, stage persona, okay, that's probably why, because there was a bit of a rewrite done to fit Whoopi. Now, Whoopi was originally going to be part of the movie when Bruce Willis was, semi-attached to it. Okay, she was cast to play the role that became played by Bobcat Goldthwait in it. Yeah, which I find really, really interesting. And when you watch that performance, there's quite a number of lines which, if you think about it as performed by Whoopi Goldberg, probably just makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I can absolutely see that happening. The fact I didn't know that about it being a potential Bruce Willis franchise Kickstarter. It's based on a series of books by a guy called Lawrence Block. Now, he's one of America's most acclaimed and prolific crime novelists. The Bernie Roddenberry series of burglar books, it started back in 1977 with The Burglars Can't Be Choosers. It's still going. His last published work was 2022 with The Burglar Who Met Frederick Brown. So there was a clear effort on this part to create a franchise of the burglar character, to have all that material ready to go.
So, fun fact,
yeah,
this is actually set in the same universe as the books.
Right.
Okay, so when Block ended up writing the novelization for the movie, okay, and when I say he wrote it, it's, that thing where they take one of the existing books. So this film was based on the book The Burglar in the Closet. So they basically took The Burglar in the Closet. But when that was being released, he wrote a short intro, and it's from the perspective of Bernie. And she explains that it's from the perspective of Bernie, who's, the male character from his book series. And he explains that he's got a cousin named Bernice, who's also a thief. And then that goes into, the adaptation of the movie Burglar.
Wow. That is interesting. Okay,
so here's a fun fact. It's a Wikipedia fact. So,
we have done our research. You can tell we didn't really want to talk about this film because we've gone to the internet to find stuff to say.
Hold tight. I think Lawrence Block might be a bit on your wavelength here. So Lawrence Block didn't see the movie when it came out originally.
Yeah.
But he did watch it on a plane. The only thing is, he was watching it on a plane, and keep in mind that, this is a 1987 film, so I'm going to guess this was back in the day where, there was the same movie being played on everyone's screens. Okay.
Well, there would have been a drop-down screen. We didn't have our own
possibly.
Screens in front. Yeah, it was the drop-down at the front of the plane.
I don't know if he was flying the same classes that we were, Simon. It could have been a little bit more hoity-toity, but
maybe, yes.
Certainly he was watching the same movie as everyone else. He was watching it with the sound off, and it was only towards the end of the movie he realized it was a film based on his book.
Oh, what a shocking revelation that must have been, because it looks nothing like a quality work of fiction, which I understand Mr. Block was quite capable of producing. So,
can I offer you something else from our notes here?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, so the company that made this is Nelvana. Now, Nelvana, I'm very familiar with as a child of the 80s. Okay, Nelvana are known primarily for a lot of licensed animated shows.
Sure.
So when they made this in 1987, they were riding high off the back of a little show called Care Bears,
Wow.
which you may remember as being a pretty big deal for a few years there.
Huge.
Yeah. So Nelvana doing, gangbusters there. Not really known for live action at all. In fact, I think this is their first live action production. Oops. But it's not their last. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. This same year, they produced one of my favorite shows when I was a kid, which was another toy tie-in. This was the less successful My Pet Monster. But if that doesn't ring a bell to you by name,
not, no.
if you saw a picture of it, you'd be like, yeah, I think I remember that.
Okay, yep.
Okay, it was kind of a thing, but it's not a Care Bear. It's not quite that. Okay, Nelvana, they didn't really make that many live action things at all. Okay, this is certainly their effort to try to get into this. Okay, but they did produce a show that was, I think, filmed in Canada, and it was made for the burgeoning US syndicated TV industry of the early 90s. I want to say it's like a 1991 program. It's a program called T&T. Okay, and T&T, one of the T's is played by a guy named Mr. T, and then there's the other T, which is a female lawyer, and both of them are lawyers who get involved in various sort of, needs to help out people in a way that, TV shows work. But get on YouTube, watch an episode of T&T. It is 5 times worse than Burglar by, no short,
I am looking forward to that.
You will love it. At least watch the opening titles. It's very funny.
TNT.
Have you ever seen Mr. T get around in a suit?
T.S. Turner was a city smart kid fighting his way off the street until he was framed for a crime he didn't commit. Amy Taylor was a young crusading lawyer. She mounted an appeal to put Turner back on the street, this time in a suit and tie, working as a private detective. Together, they are T&T.
Let's have a quick chat about the key players in this film. Obviously, we've mentioned Whoopi Goldberg up front. Now, I remember the explosion of Whoopi Goldberg when Colour Purple came out, her film debut. And then she had the hit comedy Jumpin' Jack Flash, which wasn't a very good film, but introduced the world to what she could do on screen. And then the wheels fell off really, really badly for her. Burglar came along. Then she did this thing called Fatal Beauty, which was stuck in post-production for ages. She made this awful thing called The Telephone. She went to go serious again with Clara's Heart, but nobody saw that. And then she did this indie film called Homer and Eddie about homeless people with James Belushi. It's
not to be confused with our other film called Eddie.
Exactly right. Which came along much later. So it's why her Oscar win for Ghost, which was the film that came after Homer and Eddie, was such a big deal, because at that point in time she was in complete career freefall. Still popular with the public. She was doing the comic aid things with Robin Williams and Billy Crystal. And had quite a high profile, but that couldn't translate into successful films until Ghost sort of revived that. So,
can I ask you a question?
Yes.
If in the same year, and look, there's nothing to suggest that she was ever up for this role or there was any sort of conversation around it, but if she starred opposite Shelley Long in Outrageous Fortune, is that a better movie?
Outrageous Fortune was pitched at such a shrill level, screeching Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, maybe she would have brought something fresh or new to it, and not just another screaming white woman kind of thing, which Outrageous Fortune was. Maybe it'd be interesting to see them both together. I don't think they ever worked together, Shelley Long and
not as far as I'm aware.
As I'm aware. Yeah. I'm going to lump these two together because we're probably going to speak more about these two actors in a future episode of Best Movie Year. But G.W. Bailey and Bobcat Goldthwait, the thriller elements of this movie are totally undone by their comic presence, and I don't say that as this film fails because of them. They do what they do, and they do it well, but they are totally in the wrong film.
Okay, first of all, let's get into this. So there's a reason they're in this movie.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, Whoopi Goldberg ends up being moved into the lead role. Okay, so she ends up, obviously needs to replace her. When that's happening, and look, I don't know that much about the production here. I've made a couple of assumptions here. Okay, but I think I might be on the money with it.
I'm pretty well versed.
Yeah, so the guys that wrote the script originally is Jeff Loeb and his writing partner, Matthew something or other. They'd come off movies like Commando. I know the first thing that they sold that got made was Teen Wolf back in the day. So, like, you know, this sort of circa 1985 through 87 period, like, these guys are pretty hot.
And we should point out that Jeff Loeb is now a very big deal in the world of Marvel. He produces a lot of the Marvel, executive produces a lot of the Marvel TV shows. So, still a very big industry player. But do go on.
Really prolific comic writer going into... that's how he sort of ended up back in the Marvel TV fold. So he ran like the Marvel Television Studios studio for a couple of years there when they were making all the things for Netflix back in the day. Yeah. So anyway, they'd written a script. Bruce Willis is going to star in it. Got retrofitted, but I'm guessing because if you look at the credit, so it's Jeff Loeb, it's Matthew, whatever his name is, and then also Hugh Wilson, who's the director of the movie. So I suspect that in the way that, you know, writing credits are issued, these guys, you know, wrote enough of the original version of the script that got used, and then you've got Hugh Wilson coming in and doing a rewrite. So I suspect that when he came in to do his rewrite, and Hugh Wilson, best known as a sitcom writer for a little show he did in the early 80s called WKRP in Cincinnati.
Did you see it? Did you see it in this?
Do I see the DNA of that?
No, WKRP in Cincinnati is playing in the bar scene on the TV in the bar. I recognised, not Suzanne Summers, who was the big blonde. What's her name from Burt Reynolds?
Yeah,
final one. It's playing in the background. But I'm a Hugh Wilson fan. I'm very fond of his. He gets this nice balance of sort of sweet and sentimental with films like Blast from the Past and Guarding Tess, and I really like WKRP. So. But he's a flavourless and boring director. I kind of think he got this gig.
You're also forgetting his biggest success.
Well, okay, I'm allowing you to say the words.
He was the writer-director of a little film that came out in 1984 called Police Academy.
Which I can't help but think, due to its success, he might have got the gig from Warner Brothers to direct this. I think he probably had a little bit of clout at this point in time.
So look, I don't know what his relationship is with Bobcat Goldthwait, because as far as, like, I don't know also what Hugh Wilson's relationship is with the Police Academy movies after the release of the first one, because he's not a writer-director for any of the subsequent films, although certainly the DNA from that first film was felt right through that series. He may have just been like a fairly active producer on those films, because he's clearly got a relationship with Bobcat, who came in on the second movie and then became more or less the star of the Police Academy movies going forward.
Yep. Well, I think Bobcat and Whoopi were tight. I know that they're sort of from the same...
Well, that makes sense. Both stand-up comedians of the same era.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, that all makes a lot of sense. And of course, G.W. Bailey was a prominent figure in 6 of the 7 Police Academy movies.
And pretty much every movie you watched back in the 80s. So that's and
TV shows.
And making a second appearance after... Well, is it second or third? He was in Mannequin. He's a best movie year favourite. We should name this the G.W. Bailey podcast.
I'm not against the idea of that. I love a bit of G.W. Bailey.
I do want to reach out and mention very quickly the actor James Handy. Spoiler alert, and look, if you haven't seen it by now, you know, get on it. James Handy, who plays the lawyer, the very seedy lawyer in this one, he did so much character work through the 80s and 90s. He started off in opposite Paul Newman in The Verdict, Arachnophobia, The Rocketeer, Jumanji, just about every television show that was made he was on. So he's an actor who I've always known the face but not always the name of. So a shout out to James Handy, who tries hard in this, let's just put it that way.
Look, I don't think there's anyone in this film that's phoning it in. Okay, but it's certainly a film that just doesn't work.
Yes, there's a lot... I found this to be a mismatch of everyone's talents. The comics can't play thriller elements, which I mentioned. The thriller writers aren't funny. The comedians are left to sort of wring laughs out of laughless material. This seemed to be at odds with itself at every turn.
Yeah. I'm suddenly reminded of the Homer Simpson line about Police Academy.
We live in a society of laws. Why do you think I took you to all those Police Academy movies? For fun? Well, I didn't hear anybody laughing. Did you?
The other thing, one of the things I was struck by this film, and the more I looked at it, the more it became obvious to me that the scenes were running way too long in this film, whether it's Leslie Ann Warren's dentist scene or the scene where Whoopi's locked in the closet, the cops breaking into her apartment. These were scenes that could have been tightened up, and they
Yeah, but like, isn't that just kind of like sort of comedy in that sort of mid-80s period? Like, to me, it just kind of felt tonally similar to a lot of other films. Like, think about Outrageous Fortune from a few weeks ago we talked about on a podcast. Like, we accused that film of being the exact same, having the same problem, with just lengthy scenes and not really enough judicial editing. Isn't it just that, you know, that's kind of the vibe of comedies at this point, and then in the early 90s, things just started getting a lot sharper and quicker with edits?
Yeah, perhaps. Well,
I mean,
depending on the kind of... And I think it's interesting that we are finding problems with two movies that are kind of similar. Outrageous Fortune was the comic thriller. This one is in the same sort of comedic thriller kind of element. Maybe it's just a tough genre to pull off the way they made movies back then.
I mean, look, I'd be curious to see films like 48 Hours and Another 48 Hours, which I think Another 48 Hours is part of the lineup for this podcast. I think.
If it is.
Or
I
maybe
think that
not.
Came later, but yeah.
Yeah, but I'd be kind of interested to see one of the sort of better respected films that kind of fall into that comedy thriller genre,
Sure.
and just see sort of what similarities they have.
Yep. Yeah, I get it. True. The pluses here, there's a cool sort of Tangerine Dream-like synth soundtrack to some of the scenes, which was very 80s, which I love, which takes me back instantly whenever I hear that sort of music.
Well, this is what I was likening at the very beginning to Fletch. It just kind of sounded like there were a lot of similar...
Yeah. And Harold Faltermeyer's cop theme. Yeah, Beverly Hills Cop theme. There's a scene in an aquarium, and I love aquariums. Whenever we travel around the world, we always tend to end up one afternoon at that city's big aquarium.
A very Troy McClure of you.
Yes, exactly right. And nothing says the late 80s rolling into the 90s like funny answering machine messages. I had one, and I can't remember what it was in this film because I watched it a week ago and forgot everything about it instantly, but I did have it in my notes. So funny answering machine messages. God, I wish I'd kept them. I used to put such effort into doing funny answering machine messages.
Yeah, our second film we've looked at on this podcast so far, starring one John Goodman.
Yes.
Yep, and here he's playing a fairly sort of thankless role as one of the two cops that are investigating the burglary and everything that comes with it.
Yeah.
There's one sort of almost funny moment where they're trying to get into Bernie's apartment, and the female cop's going to kick the door down, and so she kicks it down, except the door is made of like reinforced like steel. Hurts her like badly, like her body sort of flings back in the hallway, and like that's kind of like, it's kind of a bit funny. But then like towards the end of the movie, they really pay off that sequence where there's been no real indication that this has been the case, but clearly the John Goodman character's been stewing on it, because when he finally gets the opportunity to do a bit of it, and I told you so for a reason that I don't remember. One of the things was, and I probably should have been the one to kick that door down. And it was just funny to hear him drop that like 35 minutes later into the film.
You're absolutely right. That was one of the few sort of unpredictable callbacks in the movie that gave me a bit of a wry smile. Having said that, I will jump forward a bit here. My most memorable scene in this, and I'm jumping over a couple of points I want to return to, but my most memorable scene, and it was very tough to find a memorable scene because I remember a lot of things being really bad and memorable. I don't want to imply that, but when a hungover Bobcat it meets the detectives at the door, and John Goodman and Elizabeth Ruscio as the partner, the one who tries to kick the door in. They are dealing with his hangover breath, and John Goodman is pulling faces back and forth that look kind of got a laugh out of me, and that was the only time I remember being moderately entertained by this film.
Like Bobcat when they went to like what Bobcat called a yuppie bar.
Yes.
Okay, and there's. In that, you got two things happening. You've got Bernie going around, Bernie being Whoopi Goldberg, going around talking to people trying to, solve the crime. And then there's just like these cutaway scenes with Bobcat sort of sitting there with, women around that he's kind of cracking onto. But there's this sort of great bit where he's sitting down next to this sort of fairly beautiful looking lady, and he's in his sort of Bobcat sort of style thing where he's kind of just in dialogue with himself and hoping that they're going to come along and be part of the conversation, but just aren't. And he ends up in his little tear saying, I'm a Gemini, I lost the keys to my BMW around here. And he's kind of just like muttering to himself. It's just very good.
My name's Carl Heffler. I'm a Gemini. I had my Jeez, my BMW was over here earlier. You didn't see it. Let's cut this shit. Would you like to like go with me?
Yes. He should have had a lot more on air time, or a lot better time on air anyway. So, the final point I want to make is the film pivots to reveal the killer's identity with a Johnny Carson sort of twist.
Yeah, that did not age well.
Oh, that was so stupid. Really? I think that's going to be how you reveal your killer? I thought that was just so dumb. And
Here's Johnny.
Was the last major eye roll that I had watching this film. Well, not entirely, because when they went in the fog at the end there, why create fog to cover up all your cast members' faces for the final payoff? But hey, which leads me, do you have
If I was in this movie, I think I'd want my face covered as much as possible.
Did you settle on a most memorable scene? Because I know we texted back and forth struggling to try to come up with one.
Look, the best scene for me is a bit of a throwaway scene at the beginning as they're trying to establish the Bernie character owns a bookstore. And just on that, one of the little bits of trivia I picked up was author Lawrence Block was talking about his books and said the reason why Bernie operates a bookstore is to meet girls. And the line out, this probably came from Wikipedia, I'm thinking, or some sort of similar site. It says that Bernie enjoys an active sex life, sleeping with at least one female character per novel, but doesn't appear to have a steady girlfriend. And what struck me about the movie while I was watching it, and just thinking about it in contrast to the book character, is that Whoopi Goldberg's Bernie is pretty much asexual during the movie.
Yes.
She makes some sort of reference to the guy who's killed that she ends up sort of, half witnessing the murder. Okay, because he seems like he's a bit of a sexual dynamo. She makes some sort of offhanded remark about, where was this guy, whatever. But, it's such a minimal moment. The rest of it, it just kind of seems as though she's got no real interest whatsoever. And, there's obviously something sort of gross about that when it's Whoopi Goldberg that's been cast in the role. But, whatever. But getting back to the best scene was she's in that bookstore. There's a guy who's been stealing books from the bookstore. So anyway, he walks up to the counter and she starts charging him $60 for it after she's locked the door. She's got her gun out and it kind of looks like she's, forcing him at gunpoint to pay $60 for the secondhand book. Okay, but what I actually quite like about the scene is that it's probably about 2/3 of the way through the scene that the scene actually tips its hand and Bernie asks for the other books that he's clearly been stealing. Okay, so it seems as though she's shaking him down for this book, but then suddenly you realise this is actually her just making sure she's getting what belongs to her.
That's when she goes full Trump and says, I could shoot a customer a week and no one would notice. And I'm thinking, yeah, someone else said that at one point.
I mean, clearly Trump was proven pretty well right on that one, so...
It's true. Exactly right. So, an MVP for this. Now, I'm going out on a limb here, and I'm using this gentleman's name and his position within the production to suggest that this was kind of a big deal for Warner's at this point because they got one of the leading cinematographers of all time to shoot this film, a man called William A. Fraker. Now, from this period, he had made movies like War Games, Rosemary's Baby, Heaven Can Wait, Bullet, a little film which you may have heard of called 1941.
No. Have you ever mentioned it?
I may have mentioned it at some point, maybe on this podcast, but just generally walking down the street, I jump in front of people and yell it in their face. William A. Fraker, there are scenes in this which are beautiful to look at. It had a big screen feel about it, and that's all Fraker's doing. I don't think Hugh Wilson had anything to do with that. And makes me think that Warner's were saying, if we get this first one right and we make it like a proper big screen movie that brings the audiences in, we'll get a franchise out of it. But in the end, it was an uphill battle for him because all his pretty pictures just couldn't help this film overall.
Yeah, it's not a unattractive looking movie by any means. Yeah.
Oh, did you have an MVP?
You've now got me thinking, just how into this film was Warner Brothers, but it's a pretty solid year for Warner Brothers. Yeah. So this is the year, so I'm just going to run through the list of Warner's titles for the year, and there's quite a few good ones.
We've done one already.
Yeah, Instant Justice, which I don't know. I'm not sure what that one is, to be honest. It starred Michael Paré.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Yeah.
Apparently,
it was a video.
He plays and has this for a great movie title. Scott Youngblood.
Oh, nice.
He's a Marine in Spain who looks for revenge for his sister's murder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should check that one out.
Saw the light of day, yeah.
Over the Top, being the Sylvester Stallone film we saw with some arm wrestling.
Yeah.
A little film called Lethal Weapon.
Of course.
We've got Burglar. In a few weeks' time, we've got Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol. Which, I mean, laugh about it all you will, but, those films made a fair bit of bank.
Made money.
They made 7 of them. It's Alive 3 and A Return to Salem's Lot, Witches of Eastwick, Full Metal Jacket, Inner Space, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, The Lost Boys, Who's That Girl, Disorderlies, A Month Later, Surrender, Nuts, and Empire of the Sun.
A lot of which are coming up on the podcast.
Yeah,
So, a big year for Warners.
2/3 of those, certainly well-remembered, well-regarded titles.
Sure. So, solid year for Warners, no doubt about that. It was the Terry Semel regime. See, now I'm going to get into my whole industry knowledge of this period, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But
I'm going to wash my hair.
Yeah. I'm going to make a big call here as far as my final thought. Oh, sorry, did you have an MVP?
MVP, look, I mean, who do you pick? It's like having a favourite child. There's just so much going on in this film.
Yeah.
But look, probably for me, it's Bobcat.
Just because it's Bobcat, not because of any
Bobcat.
particular.
That's kind of it. There's just a few scenes where I don't think he's particularly amazing in this movie, and I'm sure that he would probably agree. In fact, I know absolutely he would agree. But he's still the thing that stands out best about the movie. John Goodman's good because he's John Goodman, but outside of that, it's not really much of a role.
All right. My final thoughts on this one, Daniel Barrett, if that is your real name.
It is not.
This is the worst movie we've done so far on Best Movie Year. I would watch would watch the chintzy Z-grade horror of The Kindred, episode 2. Do go and listen. I'd watch that again before I watch Burglar again. I found at least Kindred had a dumb, stupid quality about it, which made it fun because everything about it was so awful. This one really felt like a missed opportunity, a production that went off the rails, and as much as they tried to save it at various points of the production, they never get close. So yeah, this is for me a new low for the Best Movie Year.
Look, to me, we've seen worse movies so far.
No, we have not.
Look, absolutely, I would absolutely watch Burglar again. In fact, I have seen this movie almost 4 times now.
That's insane.
Trying to watch it, but it's a better movie than Outrageous Fortune by a long mile. Outrageous Fortune was just insipidly bad. Okay, it's Mannequin's kind of watchable, but I'm not sure it's a better movie than this. I don't know.
Okay,
I mean,
all right.
I'll certainly say G.W. Bailey is more watchable in this than he was in Mannequin.
I thought he was more suited to Mannequin than he was to this. He plays a more fleshed out character than this, but I don't think it makes it a better movie as a whole because of that. All respect to you.
Yeah. And look, obviously it's better than Evil Dead 2. No, I'm just kidding.
All right,
just kidding now. Just kidding.
Recommend to watch? No. Does it help our argument that 1987 was the best movie year ever? No. You want to add to that?
Look, I'd struggle to say, but as always, you can't appreciate the sweet without the sour.
Sure. Well said. It's very Confucian of you. Over the next few weeks, we are hitting a rare patch of films that maybe aren't all that remembered, but are going to give us a great sort of insight into the kind of films that were hitting cinemas in 1987. Next up for us is The Fourth Protocol. Now, this is a Michael Caine and a young Pierce Brosnan in a UK thriller, which I've seen once as a VHS film. I don't recall with any great fondness or clarity, quite frankly. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, sorry, you said we're about to hit a patch. It's literally a week of that. So we've got The Fourth Protocol, but then we hit the Bruce Willis, Kim Basinger comedy Blind Dates, which
Blake
I
Edwards
think that's
film.
pretty well remembered.
Love
Police Academy 4, Secret of My
baby.
Success, Project
Wow.
X, and then we've got a bit of a patch of a few films which are, kind of half remembered.
I imagine you lying in bed every night with your bed sheet up around your face, just scrunching it up, waiting for Police Academy 4 to come around. It's keeping you...
I am genuinely so excited for the back-to-back Police Academy 4 Secret of My Success double week.
That is a huge bit of podcasting. We've got that in the weeks ahead here on the Best Movie Year podcast. Dan Barrett, anything else you want to add?
I'd just like to say, if people want to track down other stuff we do, I've got a newsletter that comes out every damn day of the week. It's called Always Be Watching. Find it at alwaysbewatching.com. Sign up. It's free. It's got all the news and information you need about the TV and TV and streaming is effectively the main bag of this one.
Listen, it's a good podcast. Sign up for it, people.
It's a newsletter, Simon. It's not a podcast. It's a newsletter.
Newsletter. I've got podcasts on the brain.
Is it just because when you read it, you hear my voice and...
I do hear your voice. That is very true, actually. When I do read your newsletter, I hear it in your voice, which irks me no end, but, I still keep reading. I write for a little website called Screen Space that I founded nearly 13 years ago, and it's been going well ever since. I'm shifting that over Substack very soon, like everybody's doing at the moment. Whew, Substack, you go, girl. And I do lots of other things.
When are you doing this? It's been about 4 weeks now.
It's been about 5 months now that I've been thinking about doing it. So, yes, I've got to do this when my life doesn't take a whole series of strange turns to sort of keep me occupied. You don't want to know.
Is it a bit like that movie Judgment Night?
Exactly. It's a bit like that movie Burglar. It shits everybody around me, including me. So, next week, Fourth Protocol. Talk to you then.
Can't wait. Folks, we'll be back next week with Best Movie Year Podcast.